If you are training models, running analytics, moving data sets between cloud, every time you pull data out of S3 bucket, you are getting hit with egress fee you did not budget for, and those fee can pile up. The storage looks cheap upfront, which is fact because that's why we try to store as much as possible. But using your own data, that's where the bill stacks up. And if you want to move workloads to a different provider, good luck with that data gravity because your data is logged in. Akave just raised $6.65 million to solve that problem. They have built an S3 compatible storage platform that's decentralized, flat rate pricing at $14.99 per terabyte, zero egress fee, and you can move data wherever your compute lives. And today we have with us Stefaan Vervaet, founder. And today we have with us Stefaan Vervaet, founder and CEO of Akave, to jump into this discussion. Stefaan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Swapnil.
It's my pleasure. First of all, I would love to know a bit about the company because you're a founder. Talk a bit about how is the company. This seems like a very crowded space. It also seems like egress costs, everything kind of unsolved problem. It's like chicken and egg solution. What led you to create this company? What is the story behind the company?
I've been in infrastructure for 20 years, and in the last 3 years before Akave, I ended up in blockchain. I worked for Protocol Labs, who built the largest decentralized storage infrastructure called Filecoin. And that's where I learned the benefits of blockchain, the primitives of blockchain, and how it could be applied to enterprise workloads. And as we were building that ecosystem, which is a very large ecosystem, we've learned that customers would come to us and wanting to move away from hyperscalers for multiple reasons. One, compliance, because they needed data to be stored locally within a certain premise. But two, they want to take control back over their assets. And we've definitely seen sort of the rise with these new AI workloads of customers realizing how important it is to control their assets in a way that they can not only govern them with their own keys, but also move them as freely as they want to, in the hope to run more analytics and do that at a lower cost. And so what we've seen is that a lot of these customers that came to us complain about a few things. One is that they felt they're locked in with their current hyperscalers, mostly because it was easy, right? In 2006, when AWS came out with S3, I was there. I've built an object store at the same time to compete against AWS. At the time, right, all the analysts were saying nobody's going to move their assets into the cloud. This is ridiculous. Enterprises will never do that. I remember those conversations very vividly. Like 16 or 18 years later now, look what happens. Amazon and Google, Microsoft, the hyperscalers sort of like took the majority share. And so what we're seeing now is sort of this trend back, not for all the data sets, but for very specific workloads and data sets. We are seeing some geopatriation, either driven by compliance or driven by the need for, lower cost compute, or just simply having access to certain GPUs and being able to run that compute locally. And so that's driving this like need for alternative solutions. And Akave is trying to solve that with providing a storage stack that is S3 compatible, so users can easily connect their existing applications that currently run in the cloud to the endpoint of Akave and move data freely out of Akave at any given time. If they want to move it to a neocloud, if they want to move it to another hyperscaler, the cost is consistent because we have a flat rate of $14.99 per terabyte, and you can retrieve as often as possible. But that's not the only benefit. And we can talk a little bit about how we separated the control plane from the data plane, because that's where really the sovereign controls come into play. But yeah, so that's sort of like where it started. It started with like customers reaching out, asking for help with like, hey, can you help me transition out of the cloud? Can you help me take back control? And so Akave started out of the venture studio from Protocol Labs as a solution that's, using blockchain plus cloud primitives as a package solution to enterprises to solve that problem.
Excellent. Thank you so much for explaining all of that in detail. It answered a lot of questions. Now, if you look at it today, one of the biggest workload that we talk about is AI. Of course, depending on industry, of course, analytics, they are driving massive data movement across platform. Of course, you explain the decentralized architecture, but if you can go just a bit deeper, especially from the point of view of, also you touched upon vendor lock-in, but when developers move or start using Akave's decentralized architecture, while still maintaining the performance interoperability that is expected from S3 compatible storage. So talk about the purely technical architectural aspect of it. How are you able to maintain a balance between what they want from performance and interoperability and the other benefits like locking and everything else that you're offering?
So today, Akave, the way the architecture is built is we have separated what typically is a monolithical approach, right? You buy storage and you buy an S3 object storage at $1 per terabyte or whatever the price is per terabyte per month. And it's sort of like a black box, right? You park your data there, you use the S3 API, and that's it. We've sort of broken this down in 3 layers. We have the data plane where the data is actually residing. We have like a verifiability layer, which I can talk about, which is a mutable audit trail. And then we have the control plane, which is where the keys are stored and where the actual encryption happens. And so as customers are looking for more controls, meaning sovereign architectures, which essentially means that they are looking to prove that they're in control over how the data is being placed, where the data is being placed, who has access to the data, and that they are in control over their keys. And so what we've done is we separated the control plane from the data plane at the storage layer so that any customer can choose from a hosted version where Akave Cloud hosts the infrastructure for the customer as an alternative to AWS S3, or a self-managed infrastructure where we are now working on the self-managed instance so that a user can run that control plane as a container where their environment is. And that also means that they're in control of their keys, which means that instead of like, you're seeing alternative solutions out, not alternative, but you're seeing other approaches out there, right? You have solutions that are really sitting at the application layer and build these connectors for every single application. Our approach has been, we're implementing this at the storage layer so that by default, any application that speaks S3, and all the applications today running in the cloud, talk S3, can sort of like automatically plug into the Akave endpoint and automatically inherit those controls if you run those controls locally. Meaning, that container can run on premises, that container could run in the cloud. And so that allows the customer to take more control over their assets. And so we have this sort of hybrid approach that we're implementing. And that's only because we've broken down the storage layer, right, in a separate data and control layer. The third layer is the audit trail. So that's really like this is where the blockchain comes into play. Because, blockchain is very powerful when it's used correctly, in the sense that you can use it to ensure immutability, ensure that there's an immutable audit trail that is verifiable, and can be used for audits to prove that data was really stored where it's supposed to be stored, where you can demonstrate that the data wasn't changed. So we're using cryptographic hashes that are based on the content itself to prove the data integrity, and that becomes important when you want to guarantee that your data wasn't tampered with. And so now today there's a lot more discussions around that, because as you're fine-tuning models or you're storing checkpoints, right? As you're fine-tuning the model, you have to ensure that checkpoint wasn't tampered with, and so you want to store that on an immutable storage layer. We have warm, we have object lock, but on top of that, we have this immutable audit trail that sort of comes into play, and this is where we see a trend like the combination of taking control back, right? Having the freedom to move your data to any compute cloud. It could be a neocloud. It could be even on premises, right? We also seeing one of our first customers actually wanted us to qualify with Snowflake, because one of those first customers was looking to move data out of the cloud to reduce their compute cost. And so it started with, hey, my number one cost is compute. How do I reduce my compute cost? Well, you shop around for cheaper compute, or you actually invest in your own compute if you're running so many compute queries that at a certain scale it may make sense to bring some of that on premises. And it's interesting to see that trend, because it's typically those customers that really care about their data sets as their core IP, or are those that are building services around that as a way to differentiate. And so that becomes their core IP, I would say, and also revenue generator. And so what we help there is we help customers by moving that data out of the cloud, by providing a lower cost on the usage itself. They can then invest that in other compute stacks, either local or in other smaller boutique neoclouds or larger neoclouds, when they need it, and that reduces the cost. That allows them to run more queries and run more compute. So today we're qualified with Snowflake. We work with Databricks. We work with Presto, Trino. So the ELT, Hugging Face, right? So when you look at the data pipeline, or the AI pipeline, right? It's not just one phase, right? There's 5 different phases, from ingest all the way to observability, where you're tracking the inferencing behavior. We sit sort of like in the middle and are sort of that larger data lake that allows you to more easily consume that data and pull it into the right compute resources when you need it.
We talked about the data part. Let's now talk about cost. Many organizations, they struggle with unpredictable storage cost and egress fees as AI workload scale. How does Akave's model change the economics of storing and accessing large AI datasets, and what impact that could have on how enterprises design their AI infrastructure? Because cost can be a big factor in companies not willing to do what they really want to do.
Yeah, that's correct. When we started Akave, like I mentioned, one of the most common challenges that we heard was one was the vendor lock-in, right? So they were locked in, but the second element to that was typically related to unknown costs that came with using the data more regularly. So basically, customers come to us and say, like, well, I don't know what my cloud bill is going to be next week or next month, because my engineers are running more experiments. And so it was really hard for the CFO or the financial directors to do budgeting, because they would only know after the fact how many queries and how many experiments were run, and then that would turn into a higher cloud bill, because in the cloud you have to pay for the number of API requests, and so that would count up very quickly. And what we saw is that there was an opportunity to price the storage at a fixed price point, it not being the lowest, in the sense that it's not like a low tier that is just there for archive purposes, and it's not the high-end tier that is there for really ephemeral storage, where you run really high queries, short period of time, and then delete it. No, in between, there was an opportunity to price it at $14.99 that customers were willing to pay in return for unlimited egress or unlimited amount of queries a month, versus charging them every time that they would consume their own data. And so this sort of helps, because customers just want they want consistency. They want to be able to budget. They want to be able to use it whenever they need it. And some months they will run low on queries, meaning they won't be running a lot of queries. Other months they will. And so we've kind of tried to create that wedge and moat by combining, right, the the fixed price point, and then at the same time also providing the controls and giving them a way to move out of these hyperscalers and allowing them to have more leverage as they negotiate with other compute partners. Because today there's just a lot more opportunity out there or options out there, right? Compute options out there. And again, because you're seeing these different cloud providers, neoclouds pop up that focus on inferencing, that focus on fine tuning, that focus on training, but they're sort of like separated out. And we don't see like customers move completely out of hyperscalers. We don't see that. We see more customers looking at, okay, this is a specific data set that I'm going to use more often. This is where I'm going to run more new AI pipelines or do experiments with. And those are the opportunities that we're latching onto.
Beautifully explained. Thank you so much. You mentioned new cloud. I was at KubeCon, and a lot of discussion there is also because of the whole global conflict, sovereignty, data sovereignty, AI sovereignty, of course, cloud sovereignty. And you folks are also calling it sovereign AI storage, where you give enterprises full data ownership and, of course, auditability. Can you walk through what that actually means in practice for developers? You did touch upon that in the beginning, but I am looking purely from regulated industries, from compliance point of view, from countries who want data sovereignty. There is sovereign cloud also where you are getting something, especially in Europe. So talk a bit about how does Akave's cryptographic verification works differently than traditional audit logs, and also gives more control, not just from the technical point of view, but also from legal point of view.
I was in Europe a month ago, meeting with European customers. And as you mentioned, right, like sovereign cloud, data sovereignty is the number one topic of discussion. And it typically is, in Europe, it's driven at a European level, to what you were saying. In the US, it's more, obviously it's in Europe, it's more about customers wanting to move out of Europe, out of American clouds specifically. So they're looking for alternative vendors that would offer a sovereign cloud. So when we started Akave, we have taken a community approach, which means that we're a software first company. And our stack is built so that integrators could run their own Akave instance locally within a region. And that's sort of like the community-centric approach that you've seen in other blockchain ecosystems, right? Where you build software open source and you allow vendors to build their own infra, which means that, you know, they can contribute hardware locally within Europe and contribute it to the Akave network, or they can run the Akave endpoints themselves as well, which is our gateway, which is why we separated out the three layers, right? The storage nodes, the ledger, and then the Akave endpoints. And so, and why is that important? It's important because when you look at the GDPR requirements in Europe specifically, there's now what they call a GDPR Cloud Act conflict, right, happening, where as a European company, you have to be GDPR compliant. At the same time, if you're storing with an American cloud that is still controlled or governed by an American board, then you are, eligible. You are subjective to the Cloud Act's implications, which means that U.S. government can still request access to your data, even if you're a European company, even if you're storing it in Europe with an American-owned company. So the solution around that is software, and the solution around that is a local integrator that runs the stack that is governed by a European integrator. And so that's really how we design Akave, because we believe that in the last 18 years, you've seen a lot of the managed service providers, but also the local VARs, the integrators, sort of lose control, I would say, by having to resell, hyperscaler services, and their margins were really low. Before that, they had a really strong relationship with the local customers, and we do very custom integrations and managed and provide custom services. And so that's sort of like changed in the last 18 years. Now we're seeing more like that movement back, where because of sovereignty, there's more opportunity for these local providers and integrators to actually, build services that are compliant, and what we're offering as the software for that in the network. And that's also the reason why we built it the way we did, because one of the big requirements to be compliant and GDPR compliant is to prove that the governance aspect. So you have to prove that not only that it resides in Europe, that is only one small piece. It's more about who controls the actual keys, who has impact on making changes in the stack, right? And then it comes back to, is that a European entity? Is that European entity controlled by European board? And so as we are building the software for these integrators, our goal is there to enable integrators to run that locally within the region. And so, yeah, that was very interesting to see that that's accelerating, because that opens up opportunity for builders like us, and also for local integrators.
Akave is targeting data scientists, developers, and of course, data engineers as they evaluate Akave against established providers. What's the migration path looks like for them? How much involved you get with them, or is it turnkey solutions? How do you move existing data lakes without breaking production workload? Because you mentioned neocloud earlier, and those are totally different. It's like customized, not a standard cloud. So also, you mentioned different European. So everybody's infrastructure is also different. The thing that they're trying to do is also different. So how does it work? If you can talk a bit about the migration path, how closely you work with them.
Yeah, you can use, because we're S3 compatible. Some of our customers use our clone to replicate. I think the because we're compatible, like for example with Apache Iceberg, all these applications that speak S3, it's a lot easier. Like for example with the Snowflake, with the Snowflake and Apache Iceberg configuration, we worked with Snowflake PM team and their team to optimize Akave to make it very seamless, so that you can just point an existing Snowflake instance that's running in the cloud now directly to an Akave's table, like an external table. So that was something new that some of the these compute platforms are supporting now, which is also interesting to see that in the past it was only supporting storage repositories or storage targets within the hyperscaler cloud, right? So as we all know, Snowflake, Databricks, they run in the cloud, and so they were supporting only cloud storage instances, and now they've supported external tables. And so the way we migrated data is simply by replicating it from the S3 target, from the AWS S3 into Akave. And the Apache Iceberg is kind of optimizing how queries can directly pull data from the Akave instance into the cloud. The second part, which is typically the hardest one, is the data movement itself is still expensive, right? So what we have is we have a direct connect to some of the hyperscalers as well, and our ecosystem of infra providers have more direct connects as well. So because one of the data lock, or the vendor lock-in is really driven by the fact that when you want to move your data out, like you said in the beginning of this call, you have to pay high price to move that data out of the cloud, right? So if you move it out of AWS, it's $90 per terabyte to even move your data. If you have a direct connect, you can lower that cost. So we help our customers by having a direct connect and moving that data out of the cloud at a lower cost. And then on top of that, as we charge less for retrieval, as we charge less for storing, you pay that back, that cost, that data movement, that one-time data movement cost within literally 2 to 4 months, depending on the size of your storage. And so, we're basically working directly with customers, but like we have partners as well that have more direct connects and help us with that data movement.
Now let's talk about growth. You folk just raised 6.65 million and came out of stealth with customers like, Intuizi, LaserSeti, 375 AI. They're already running their workloads on Akave Cloud. Talk a bit about this investment. Talk a bit about where are you going to look for growth, further investment, and What is your vision for the company, long-term vision, and what is your short-term vision for 2026?
So for 2026, our goal is to increase the funnel, bring more customers online, of course. We have seen an interesting, we're seeing interesting trends, right? You have the traditional ELT workloads. That's where we started, mostly because that's where a lot of data is being processed. The pain is higher. We're now seeing agentic AI workloads coming into play. And a perfect example of that is X402, this new X402 standard, the sort of like the payment payment standards for agents, or is one of the standards that's Coinbase and Cloudflare are driving. So we're seeing more interest in that. So our goal is to, one, expand, invest also in partners, and grow the network. And then, so because last year, we're not 2 years old yet, right? So in the last almost 2 years, we spent most of our time on developing. We spent most of our times on design partners. And now that we have more customers under our belt, now our goal is to rinse and repeat, replicate. And the long-term vision is obviously to become the storage layer for AI, agentic AI, and AI workloads as a whole. And that's a big, when you say AI workloads, that means a lot, right? So you had to be, but I do believe that in the long term, agents will become the largest consumers of hardware resources. Even though humans are behind the scenes, right? Like driving these agents. What that means though is that the interaction with storage will change. And so for that, you need better rails, better data rails that are more optimized for agentic workloads. And that's really what we have built here. We started with S3 compatible interfaces, right? Because that's where you have to start. You have to create the bridge, make it easy to use, make it easy to integrate in existing workloads. But down the road, we have already built, as you mentioned, SDKs, for the development community, because as that transition happens, what we're seeing is, and I'm sure you've seen this too, we're seeing a lot more customized software being built, right? Instead of using all these SaaS solutions, and then we do it internally too, right? You build your own CRM, or you build your own custom workflow for going after customers or running marketing campaigns. All of that is customized. All of that is built on SDKs, APIs. And so we've built a bunch of SDKs. So specifically to support that new wave of custom applications that are going to be built. And that's also why I believe the separation of control and the data plane needs to be built in the storage layer itself. Because the higher you go up in the application, it's a great solution as well. But that means you need more connectors and you need more maintenance, versus the lower in the stack, you sort of like leave it up to the user and the agent, right, to build whatever application is required for that particular use case. And so automatically you will inherit all the controls as you use our control plane. And this is where I see the future happening. And, it could take a little longer, although it's very interesting to see how quick this market is moving. So yeah, who knows where we're going to be next year, but that's the long-term vision.
Stefan, as you rightly mentioned, Akave is tackling one of the most frustrating challenges in AI infrastructure, which is unpredictable storage cost and, of course, vendor lock-in. With decentralized S3 compatible alternative, you're giving enterprises control over their data and their economics that they need, especially in this geopolitical scenario where more and more organizations, they are looking for data sovereignty, AI sovereignty, cloud sovereignty. Thank you so much for joining me and sharing these insights. And since you folks are doing a lot of work in this space, you're growing, I would love to talk to you again, but I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.